Okay. Okay. So we're up to you guys up to Perek Reish Chav Beis, Amid Tov Mem Ches, right? Chapter 222, page 448. So let me just sum up where we're at. Basically, he's in process of explaining the whole difference between the shemen and the kteris, the oil and the incense. And he began a while back here, Os Reish Yud. So we're talking about 12 chapters ago, explaining these two differences, and said there's two types of oil, there's two types of incense. And the process also explaining the difference between the kteris and the karbonis. All this is coming to explain. The bottom line is all this is an explanation in the difference between the two types of the two levels of meiches tima that had come down through the cyrus, through the hair strands. One that comes down from the etzem of Atik, and the other that just comes down in a diminished fashion into Chachma Gluya. The bottom line, this is all coming to explain the mamutza, the intermediary, the interface between Ein Seif, the Maitzil, the source, and the Netzalim, the emanations of Atzilus. I'm just putting it, that's the context of it. We'll get back to that because as he winds down here, remember we're now in the Maimer Lech Lecha, there's one more Maimer Vayera before the Rebbe Rashab takes a break until next Shavuos. I mean, we'll just continue learning it, but he sums up the whole subject matter. So it's all about the interface between that which is the infinite and the finite. If you remember, Kesser Atik and Arich can't be the interface alone because Atik is always Ein Seif. Arich is always the Sherish and Netzalim, the root of the emanations. So he identified Meiches Tima, the concealed and unconscious Meichen, as being the Mamutza.
Yeah, but it's really part of Arich too. Let's not forget that.
Yeah, but it's Mamutza between Atik and lower. It's a place that travels both ways. Right. So Meichen, in other words, within Kesser, is ultimately the so-called the meeting point, where they all come together. So to understand all that, he went into a whole arichas, a discussion, the difference in Keteris and Shemen and so on. So where we are right now in the last few chapters is discussing the difference between the Karbonis and the Keteris, which is the difference between Pnimius and Makif. The Karbonis were eaten. Their main thing was to be eaten. Eating is Pnimius. When you eat something, you would ingest it. Karbonis, Keteris you don't eat, Keteris you smell. Is the incense, the aroma, which is a makif. And the general difference is that a makif reaches deeper into the nefesh. Reach can awaken a nefesh from a chayes chodesh. Someone that's faint or someone that's passed out can revive you. Eichel gives you strength, but doesn't give a chodesh, doesn't give new life.
But it's a different question. He's not talking about the actual mechanism of Chachmat Tzumah and the real mamutz and really he's giving one example of something that travels in that path. That's a big difference in the questions he was asking.
Well, when he'll sum up, he'll get back to it. The Rebbe Rashab is going to tie it together. Okay. This is all coming to explain different levels. Right. I wouldn't yet conclude it yet. Right now he's still in the middle of the discussion of the Pnimi and the Makif and so on and so forth.
I mean, he's going to throw that in, but it has to be only one example of this.
The other not, maybe more. Maybe it's more deeper than that. Why do you conclude that? Do you look further?
No.
I'm sure it's more than just an example. He wouldn't go for 14 chapters on something that's just an example. It's probably much more fundamental than that.
No, I'm talking about the Ketorahs and the Shem.
I know, that's exactly what I'm talking about. If he's talking about such a length, I would say it's much more fundamental in understanding. He wouldn't go for so many pages to explain Meiches Tima with one example. It's not this.
We don't have Ketorahs or
we're talking about the Avodas Hashem of it. We're talking the Ruchnis, the Kavod.
There's still sort of connection between the infinite and the non-infinite that's occurring in our daily lives, And that only occurs when we have the base of Mikdash.
Oh no! But everything that was the base of Mikdash now exists in spiritual avodah.
Oh, so by saying Keturis, we
he's talking about the avodah of it, of course, the Rus and the Liba. So one second. So let's so there's the Primi and the Makif, and the Reach of the Keteris reaches deeper into Atik in Atik, but from Atik it brings down only Nechetzenis. Reach, on the other hand, even though it reaches deeper into the soul, but it comes down on an external level, which is only smell. Whereas the Karbonis, even though it doesn't reach into Etzem, into the essence, but it comes down in a primistic way. Then he explained, but also Karbonis have Reach Nechayach, but that's a Reach that's connected to the Makif within the Primi. Whereas the Reach, the aroma of the incense, is the Makif Be'etzem. And essentially, the difference between that two is that one changes the Nefesh HaBamis. You can actually change the personality of a person, the way he used the expression. You could change somebody should be from a cruel person should actually be a compassionate person. Where the Karbonis doesn't have the power to change, to transform something on that level. So in the last two chapters, Reish Chof and Reish Chof Aleph, in this Maimer Lech Lecha, basically he's discussing the difference between the two. That Keteris goes back is the Avodah of Re'us de Liba, which is the deeper part of the heart that has the power to transform, and the Karbonis is only the Avodah al Pi Patam V'das, which is the rational Ava, which is the Primius. It does not have the power to transform. So that's basically the summation to where we are here. Now we're going to continue. We're going to continue Reish Chof Beis.
I have two questions here. The first question is that what's the difference in the Reich and Chayach to the Karbanis themselves and the Karbanis? In other words, what's the difference in that level?
Basically, what he's saying is Reich is always the birur of the opposite. Remember, he said Reich comes from it's a form of changing something that's coming from the opposite.
The carbon and the Reich of the carbon.
So the carbon itself is the Kedusha. You're eating something, and you're consuming it, you're ingesting it. That's the Primi. And the Reich of the Karbonis is that it also has an effect on the Sitra Achra, on the negative. I would say the Primi is just I mean, even the Eichel is also, remember, you're eating it, but you burned he said you burned the Chelev and the Dam. You burn the fat, the pleasure, and the Koch, and the passion. But the bottom line is that he says it clearly. This is Befedish. He says it's the makif of the Pnimi. That even his words are.
What does that mean? What's the benefit or what's the power behind?
The power that affects also doesn't just. It's not just a positive. It's not just talking about. It's also affecting your animal soul. Remember, being a korban is the animal soul.
Right,
remember, he says the bir habnega, bir tev shebenega. So both keteris and karbonis are all. Remember, these are Vedas that are all coming to transform the material world and make it a keli felikus. Let's talk about the mamutza. Okay, keteris and karbonis. The bottom line is they're all service in the Beis Hamikdash and Mishkan in order to transform the world and make it some keli felikus. The question is what part of the world and how much the transformation takes place. So karbonis is on the mizbeach hachitzon, if you remember. So it's talking about chitzeni salam. So karbonis deal primarily with the outer levels, al pitam v'das, is pnimiyazdik, but it only affects, it does not transform the nefesh habam, the animal soul. It weakens it. It tames it.
Right.
It weakens it. So we say like this: the eating of the carbon is more the pnimiyas of avodah al pitam v'das, like these bonus to think that Hashem sustains me, the power of Elokus you see in the world, all things that are how the rational mind can relate to Elokus. And the Reach of the Karbonis is the makif within that affects also the Reach. The smell comes from the burning of the animal, so that somewhat affects the animal also part within us, which is not through transformation, through iskafia. Keteris, on the other hand, you don't ingest. It's a much more subtle type of service. You just burn the incense. All it is an aroma. But that aroma reaches all the way into the primius of the So you need both. They're both different ways of
No,
transforming.
I understand.
Okay.
No, just the next question is when he says over here, Amram Chinas and Reish Chaval, right in the beginning, it says Amram Chinas just live Shehi.
Ava built him with bells.
Right?
Right.
So why is it called Jerusalem Liba? Because it's around. It's Jerusalem Liba.
Because Arusa means Ratzon, the deepest Ratzon of the heart.
Right, but why is it connected to the heart, Dafka, not let's say to the rest of the body? Because it seems like it's all over.
But no, remember he does say at the end of the day, that's what he's saying here, that even the Keteris are in Atzilus, not higher than Atzilus. You're still talking about an Aveda that even if it's a Makif,
Right.
like you said, it's a Makif Yosher, Makif Dechaya, it's still related to the Keiches. It's not complete Makif. Remember, he's going to go now to Keteris of Yom Kippur is going to be in a higher level. This is a regular Keteris.
So I'm saying in Ratzin, the higher level of Ratzin is in the heart or in the brain? Like in the will of a person to live. Is that the same Ratzin?
I don't think it's connected.
It's not connected?
Ratzon the same every place, anyway.
No, but why is it called Rusa Liba? That's what I'm trying to understand. Why?
Rusa Liba really means the deeper Ratzon of the level of the Nefesh HaLakis to want to connect to God. It has nothing to do with life. It's to do with Aved. It's to do with Alakus. Rusa Liba is that deeper Ava of the heart. To connect, yeah. To connect. It's that flaw, like he says here. The... What did he say? Says, yeah, I'm sure I'm not going to shaykhel apnim, but we do in Jerusalem is gal. There's a flaw. It's not to say it's not ava that comes from meditation, contemplation on the natural or on
it comes from
Elokus. That it comes. It's a ava that comes from the awe about Hashem. So the soul of a Jew feels that awe.
So I'm saying that's much more. That's much. In other words, if down in this world, I'm saying from the heart. The heart is closer to the spirituality or Nefesh than the brain.
He's not talking about that here. I don't think that's the discussion here. He's not trying to distinguish between mind.
I'm just wondering why
he's not distinguishing mind and heart here. Okay.
Okay.
So Reish Chav Beis v'kol zeh hu b'kteirus shebehechel. All this is talking about dictators in the hechel. Remember the hechel. There's 3 sections in the Beis Hamikdash he mentioned in the beginning of Reish Chav. There's the outer courtyard, Oyel Moed. I'm just referring you to the beginning of Reish Chav. This is very important here, relevant. That he says there are three sections. Gimel Diyurim Sheva Mikdash, right in the beginning of Reish Chav. So you have Chotzer, Oyel Moed. That's like the outer courtyard. That's Keneged, the worlds of Bri, Yitzir, Asiyah. It means it's an outer dimension. That's where the Mizbeach HaChitzon is, and that's where the Karbonos are brought. Then you have the Oyel Moed, Shehu HaHechel. You have the next, which is what we call Kodesh or Hechel, is the inner. That's where the 3 Kelim are, the Menorah, Mizbeach HaPnimi, and the Shulchan. Okay? That's considered that the Eved HaPnimi is the Keches HaPnimi. In the body, the Biyah is like the legs, the chest, the heart, is the Heichel, and the Kodesh Kodashim is the mind. Then you have the third dimension, which is Kodesh Kodashim, is, as he says, is neged. So the Heichel is neged Elam Atzilus, and Kodesh Kodashim, the Holy of Holies, where the Aron was, is connected Elam Sa'ensa for Lefnei Atzilus. So all this discussion we've been having now has been really about the outer Biyah, or in the body it's the legs, and Aveda Pnimis, Arusa Deliba of the Mizbeach HaPnimi, the Heichel. We haven't even talked about the Holy of Holies, which is a Yom Kippur, once a year experience. So all this is about the first 2 levels. And Keteris here, we're talking about the Keteris and the Heichel that were offered every day. And all this, that's why he's saying that even the Keteris that reaches the Etzem, it's still the Makif Lefi Erech HaPnimi. It's still Makif of Erech HaPnimi. It's not really the Makif of the Makif. That's essentially what he said till here. So it calls out b'kteira shebehechel shu'inyan ru'usa deliba shezem mamshich mil maila b'chinas makif avul hu b'chinas chetzenis hakeser commission is boiled perek reshut ches. Even the kteira is still chetzenis hakeser. It's rooted in primius hakeser. If you remember the last chapter, the one we had, actually I researched the whole thing with the Meturgeman, the translator, in the interface. You have to look in Aysamach Vav. That's where he talks about it in very clear detail. This is a summary of that. We'll talk about it. Let me just continue here. That basically the Meturgiman has both elements. It depends who it is. If it's the worlds, they get the external part. The Neshamas get the previous part. The bottom line is that, as he said there, the Meturgiman, the translator, gives you the seichel of the speaker. But you don't get the etzem of the speaker, you're still getting it through him. So it has both the Pnimius and the Chitzenius. In other words, you're really getting the Chitzenius. So the bottom line is that the Keteris, even though they reach into the deeper level, but it's still Chitzenius HaKeser. Omnam, however, the Keteris, the Yom Kippur, Yom Kippurim, the Keteris of Yom Kippurim, which is once a year, Shemachnisin B'Kedesh Kedoshim Hu Inyan HaTshuva. So the Keteris of every day of the Heichel is Aved of the Rusa de Liba, it's L'mayla Metam V'das, but it's still Chitzenius HaKeser. You talk about the Keteris of Yom Kippur, which is in the Holy of Holies, which remember is not just Atzilus. Now we're talking about the Elamis higher than that, Elamis Ein Seif. Could the Isa b'Medrash Rabbah Shir Hashirim al Pasuk Eshkil HaKefer Omar Rabbi Yitzchak V'Kisei Onan V'Kisei Onan HaKteris. Okay, so it says on the Pasuk Eshkil HaKefer, Rabbi Yitzchak says V'Kisei Onan HaKteris, that it was completely covered when they would offer the Keteris. It filled. We say it's Yom Kippur in davening by the Aveda, that the whole Kedesh Kedoshim filled with smoke, like a cloud. The Chisei Onan HaKteris. So he says, HaKisei Hazeh Ein Onu Yedeh Mahu. Rabbi Yitzchak says, we don't know what this covering was. It's a mysterious covering. Ad Sheba David, until David came, Upirshei, that this Kisei, this cloud covering, Upirshei Nusata Ovon Imcha Chasisa Kol Chatosim Sela. And that's what David came to say, that God, in a sense, Nusata Ovon, tolerates and contains our sins, and covers up all our transgressions. So what's the kisa? What's the covering? What's the consist? So until David came, we didn't know what's the meaning of the cloud covering. So the cloud covering is covering up all our iniquities, basically.
It's like rewriting history, like it never happened.
Right, exactly. So it's a major cover up. But this is by God, so it's not. So it's a real cover-up. It's coming not from human denial.
It never happened.
But one second. So from this we see that the cloud of the Keteris is the tshuva, is the inyan of tshuva. In other words, to create such a total transformation, such a total cover-up, such a total effect, this is your mamshich from truth through tshuva, atzmus ein sof, mamish, pnimis hakeser. Not just chitzenis hakeser, which is the rest of the year, the Keteris. Va'inyan, and the inyan on this is the hine be'idra rabba. This is Zoyar. Be'idra rabba, whenever you say idra rabba, idra zutta, you can rest assured it's going to be very dense Kabbalistic terms. It's a very, that's, Idra there was the two parts in the Zohar. Idra is the group. There's the large group and the small group. So in Daf Kuf Lamed Beis, Isa. Do meide de chutma mechad nukve chayin umechad nukve chayin de chayin. This is the mare, this is the power of the nose. Of the chutma, chetim, the smell, the nose, that from one side, one nostril, you receive life, and from the other nostril you receive the life of life. Yes, chayin and chayin de chayin. What is this? What is this? Two types of chayin? He's going to say the two types of keteris, bapashtus. For who the menokiv hayamin, from the right nostril, from the right hole. Nokiv is whatever.
Opening.
Hole.
Orifice,
right? Nofik chayin comes out life. Umanokov hasmeil, and from the left orifice, from the left nostril, nofik chayin the chayin comes out life of life.
Is that higher?
Of course.
But that must go. Is I wonder if I don't even remember.
One second, and he says,
Let's go to the.
"Ubesefer Kel Barama," which is an interpretation, which is a pirush on Zeir on Idri Rabbi, says Kosev Lehepech. He says the opposite.
Yeah.
That the right is the Chayin, and left is Chayin. Ach b'ksovim isa kanal. But in writings, the Rebbe Rashab says it like I just wrote it. He's just again being thorough that there is someone who interprets it the other way.
So that's the because.
Because it depends if the five is cross. I don't even remember.
Okay. So now he's going to explain this in Aveda and Chassidus. What is Chayin and Chayin? The Chayin, he says, Ayin Beis HaMekifim Di Chaya and Yechida. These are the two makif. Remember, the Keches Pnimim is Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama. Just for the record, Nefesh is Nihi, Ruach is Chagas, and Neshama is Chabad. So that's the internal faculties. In context of our discussion here, that's the Aveda of the Karbonis, Aveda Pnimis, right? The Aveda of Biyah, B'riyat Tzirasiyah. Then comes Makif of Chaya, and then comes Makif of Yechida. So really, we're talking now, till now we've been talking about Makif of Chaya, the Makif of Er Yosher, as he's going to say, and the Makif of Er Chezer, which is the Makif of Yechida. So this is the two. The Chaya v'Yechida. So just a little background. What is Chaya Yechida? Generally speaking, when we talk about the 5 levels of the Neshama, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya Yechida. So as I said, Nefesh is usually biological life, the basic functions, being alive, or in the context Nihi, action oriented. Ruach is emotional life. For example, a person in a coma, God forbid, or a vegetable also has nefesh. Or a person who's walking around like a zombie and doesn't have any, is not really living yeah. So Chaya adds emotional life, which is Chagas, Chochem, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes. And Neshama is intellectual life, with the mind. So those 3 is that. But there's not a transcendental dimension to that life. Most people have those 3. Everyone has some intellectual form of life. I'm not talking about where you use your mind, and there's some emotions. Chaya adds a makivdika thing, which is usually compared to rotzen. Some general will. What's the purpose of your life, the transcendence of life. And Yechid is the etzem nefesh. Not mamish, but as close as it gets to etzem in a name.
Not mamish?
Because it says Chassidus sometimes that when it says Chamisha Shemes Nikra La, that the soul is called with 5 names. So from that there's a soul before the 5 names. So even Yechida is ultimately a name. That says in some places. It's most cases you say Yechida connects with the Yachid, and that's like the Etzem HaNefesh. So in our Aveda it goes like this. All days of the year we have 3 tefillas, Keneged Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama. Shabbos and Yom Tov we have Musaf, Keneged Chaya. And on Yom Kippur, only once a year, we have 5 tefillas, Keneged Yechida also. That's when we have the power to actively... Ne'ilah is Yechida. The rest of the year, we don't have direct access to Yechida. On Yom Kippur, it's the Yechida of the Nefesh. I'm just giving a little background. Okay. Tehine hachetem, now he's going to explain what's the connection to the nose. Tehine hachetem, the nose, hu keli hareach. The nose is a keli, a container, a vessel, I guess a channel for reach, for smell. That's the nose's primary function. Reich b'derech klal ubchinis makif kenal perek reshut zayin. And reich in general is makif. So as opposed, for example, to taste, where you're actually ingesting the food as we've discussed, reich is the nose. Reich is generally the makif. So the nose connects to the keches hamakifim of the soul. And now the 2 nostrils is going to say is chaya and yechida, the 2 makifim. Okay. So rak shemenakiv hayamini from the right. And however, just that the difference is that from nokiv hayamini from the right orifice, from the right nostril nimshach chayim. So who beginners makiv the er yosher shazel beginners makiv the chayim. So from the right, they're both makif, because remember we're talking about smell. But in makif, there's 2 makif. The makif of yosher, that's the makif of chaya, that comes from the right. That's the right side of it. That's the right nostril. Or manokif hasmeli, and the left nostril, the left orifice, bechinis makif the er chezer, bechinis yechida. That's the legal makif the er chezer, bechinis yechida. You remember back when we learned about makif and er yosher, makif er chezer. That was in the Sukkot Maimon, right? About the Ribuah, the square and the circle. If you remember back where was it? Yeah, Eses Sukkos Tachas Ilon. This mimer here. I just want to look at it a second. Make sure I got it all connected. Yeah.
There is a nose, goes probably just to the left side, goes to the left brain, which is the part that we get speech from and intellectual part.
Yeah, okay. In us, just for the record, in Ois Reish Vav, in chapter 206, he discussed at length, relatively at length, the difference between Makaveh Yesher and Makaveh Chezer. That Makaveh Yesher is Bekiruv. Remember, that's like the emek, the depth that remains, but you can't. It's not stimah be'etzem. It's like the mem, not the samach. It's makiv, but it's that which is concealed, but it's still relative to what you know revealed, conscious. And then there's a makiv be'etzem that's completely apart. That's what he said back there. So okay. So now, there we go. What's the inyan in this? These two levels of makiv, these two nostrils, these two dimensions within the chaytim, within the nose and the smell. Inyan the hine b'chai, because of the Rabbeinu b'chai, the Pirush writes on the pasuk vayitzar. Remember the Torah, it says that vayitzar ha'adam, that Hashem shaped the human being. So vayitzar is with two yuds, not one. In Bereshis. Two nostrils. The hachetim ukeli l'neshama. This is what the Bechai writes. The nose is the keli for the neshama. The neshama who nechnesus and neshama who yitzas, because the soul enters through the nose and leaves through the nose. Remember, let's not just forget also when it says God took earth from the ground, offer min adam vayipach ba'apov nishmas chayim, and he blew into his nostrils a soul of life. So you see, God is breath. It's breath through the nostrils. So when we breathe, the way healthy breathing is through the nostrils. So I guess, and the Gemara actually asked the question, when Neshama, where's it, where's it? But it talks about the nose, some of the nose.
Out through the mouth. And when Aaron passed away, and Moshe passed away, they had the kiss of death. It was on the mouth.
Yeah. Anyway, this is Bechai. The Bechai is writing. Kalim Sham the Mishami Nechnas Mishami says. Well, Lachem Misha Nofla Love Mapelis. And therefore, when Mapelis is when
like a building collapse.
Yeah, when some type of collapse, something collapses, something like a building falls on somebody. Basically, somebody's considered maybe dead. Sichim livdige se at chetme. You have to check to his nose whether he still has any breath coming out of his nose. Bottom line, in the Talmudic and Torah way of determining life is the breath from the nose. Not a pulse and not other things. The breath from the nose. The gam imachayis enanikar belibe. Even if you see the heart is not beating, you don't see chayis in the heart. It's still possible he still has breath in his nose. In other words, the heart could stop, but the breathing continues. At least for a while. Obviously, it's not going to last. But it means if you wanted to define whether the person is dead or alive, declaring dead is not from the heart alone, you have to do breath. Which is, by the way, a big issue today with heart transplants. Pi halacha, they have to take the heart before the person is mamish, because you need the heart. It can't be a heart from a dead person. So it's a big issue. This is one of the loopholes, because according to halacha, as long as he's breathing still alive, and you can't kill somebody. So it's a big thing, a heart transplant. It's one thing a person's completely dead and you take a heart, but they need to take the heart as close as possible to that moment of what we call death. Question is, the rabbis argue, when is death? Someone says as soon as you take the heart, that's death. So basically you're killing the person. Others argue because of this, that no, you can take the heart, but it's a whole, it's complicated. But the bottom line is what he's trying to say here is that you have to check, not as...
He's not breathing anyway during these operations. The blood is being oxygenated by a heart-lung machine.
Listen, I know the general principles. I'm not sure exactly how it works. Well, maybe because he stopped breathing, that's why you could take the heart.
He's
Maybe
dead
that's
already.
it.
So he's dead.
From a Torah point of view, but medically he may not be dead.
Yeah, medically he's not. From a Torah point of view, is everything.
Okay. Anyway, bottom line is, so it could be that, I think this is all still the Bechai, I'm not sure, but it could be. Anyway, bottom line is, we see from this, that the Chaitan is the ultimate arbiter, the ultimate determination about life. So even though the Chayis can still be Nikr Beliba, even though in the heart you can't recognize any life, but it could still be this Yesh Chayis B'Chaitim, like Rashi says there. Which is the reason why you have to be Beidik Ada Chaitim when somebody is in an accident.
If he's about to die, you're not allowed to cause him to die. So you can, what is that called when you can't touch?
Yeah. And the Goyes is.
Yeah.
Okay, V'sham b'Gemara u'b'seita. We're on top of page Tov Mem Tes. V'sham b'Gemara, in that place of Gemara u'b'seita Daf Mem Vav Amud Beis. He's giving us all the sources, so we can check it up. The li'in chayusa hakol meidim de'ikar chayusa ba'apeho. So in the Gemara there, and also in Seita it says when it comes to life, everyone agrees the ikar chayus is in the nose, the apahu. The yesh lemer, this I guess the Rabbi Rashab is saying, the yesh lemer shzel lefi shachetim hu shar hamoichin. He's explaining why now. This is pretty powerful stuff here. The gate of the mind. You said that before, that the nose. Yeah, he's saying Shar HaMeichin, the gate of the mind.
The left goes into the left brain. The left brain, I don't think they cross.
In other words, the question really is here, what's the power of the nose? I mean, on a very basic level, you could argue the nose is nothing. All the nose is a channel for breath. It's the lungs that breathe. The nose doesn't breathe. And even technically, even if you close the nose, you still have a mouth. And you could technically find other ways to create ventilation. So what's the power of the nose? So why does the Gemara make the nose? Why does it say check the mouth, check the breath? Neshima. However he's breathing. So he's making it deeper here, that the nose, why we breathe through our nose is because the nose is the gate to the mind. So in other words, it's a gate to bring life. Let's continue and see what he says. Even though the Rebbe Rashab says Yesh Lemer, that's his explanation, he says it's mashma like that, also in the Gemara. You have to look in the Gemara why, but that's what he says. The Kamoisha hapehu shar halev, just as the mouth is the gate of the heart, v'zehu sha'adibur hu ma'apeh, shebo mehevel halev. And what does that mean? That speech, which comes from the mouth, comes from the hevel halev, comes from the breath of the heart, I guess. When we speak, it comes from, how would you, hevel halev? Hevel is breath. Hevel.
There's a
ear, hevel.
No, it's like a light, not mist, but it's you see by what's it called? It's by a bird.
Bird?
Yeah, when it falls in a bird, more than Tvachim. So this the hevel is not
that kind of hevel.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Thing.
Well, hevel havolim in Kahelas means nothing. It's the hevel is like shtus and empty.
Right,
empty.
It's a very light.
I think hevel is like
a light.
Hevel halev is like a maybe a full hevel halev.
In psychological.
No.
It's psychological.
No. It's a light. It's not a mist. It's a light air. It's
an air mamish.
There's a word for it.
A flutter. No. I think it's like a hevel halev. I have to look it up. But hevel halev.
But in Ibn it talks about it.
So just as the mouth is the gate of the heart, because the dibur, speech, comes from hevel halev. Same thing as the nose is the gate of the mind. V'yidua the klolos chayes hanefesh u'ba'meich shabereish, and it's known that the klolos chayes hanefesh, the general life force of the soul, rests and in the meich shabereish. And since the nose is the gate of the mind, that's what the Gemara says, that the primary chayes is the nose. Now this, when we say that the nose is the gate of the mind, this This is atzmis hamech, the essence of the mind. Shari hadibur hu gam ken shar hamech. Because speech is also a gate. Through speech, we also speak seichel.
Yeah, but it comes through.
Hu gam ken shar hamech. Shekol is gala seichel al yedei hadibur. Because all these galas, the revelation of our seichel, comes through speaking about it, through conversation, through speech. Rak shezel chitzenis haseichel. However, in speech, it only comes chitzenis haseichel. Ukidu the seichel gali hu mechitzenis hachachma. As it's known that the revealed seichel comes from the chitzenius of chachma, the outer level of chachma. So therefore, when we say that nose is the gate of the mind, that's not the external meichen that comes to the dibur, but it's the atzmis meichen, the essential meichen. U'kaneda hefresh ben hashpos haseichel hashpos hatipa. He's going to explain now the difference between the hashpos haseichel, that when someone transmits intelligence, lashpos hatipa, like the hashpah of the tipa, which is the drop. I guess he means here the tipus, the tipa that comes from the semen. The hashpos, like he says in Tanya, the hashpos haseichel rak ha'ara levad. When you transmit seichel, it's only a reflection. But in the tipa, like he says in Tanya Ayin Beis, in the drop, that the seed of life, there you don't just get a reflection. You get atzmis hamechin. That's why it has the power to birth someone that's just like you. So it's not just like similar to you. In other words, when a father's seed he fertilizes the egg and the child is born, that child doesn't just have a reflection like a talmid who's listening to a teacher. There's something from the mind, the way the brain, the actual DNA makeup of the mind goes over to the child. So he's getting the atzmus hamech of the parent, of the father. Similarly, this is the difference between the mouth and the nose. Peh, like in the transmissions, like the Talmud and the student, is only a keli, a container for the gili of the chitzenis and nefesh, the chitzenis hachachma. So the outer nefesh.
It's like the targum. It's like the translator.
Yeah, in a way, and the chitzenis hachachma, and the outer level of chachma. V'achetem hushar atzmis hamechin the sham kishur v'chibur etzem and the sham mamash. But the nose, on the other hand, is the gate for the atzmis hamechin, and that connects the etzem and the sham mamash. Which explains, in other words, why scent actually does revive somebody, because it reaches into the it's reaching into the inner source of life, so it could revive a new form of life. It's not over yet. Remember, we still have the two nostrils, so there's two levels in this atzmus hamechin itself.
Normal Taurus and Yom Kippur Taurus.
Right, exactly. So from there, from the nose, yes, beis madreges, are there two levels? Ve'hin chayin, v'chayin, v'chayin. There's life and the life of life. The level of chayin, life, meaning reaching into that place from the right nostril, that's the level of eir yosher. It's a direct light, direct energy. That's the general gili of life in the soul to energize and sustain the body. And this is the breath, which is a sign of life. So the right nostril chayin is the etzem chayis that gives chayis to a person, and that's why this is the breath that is a sign and of life. When a person is breathing, when you see the breathing from the nostril, you realize there's life. The kashem shachayis shebelav ubchinas defika. Just as, how do you recognize what's the sign of life in the heart? You see it through a pulse, contracting and expansion back and forth. Like explains elsewhere the reason for that, and look what we learned earlier. And this chayis, that's the right nostril, which is comparing now to the heartbeat, pulse. is the chayes that comes in er pnimi be'evrei haguf. This is the chayes that is internal and manifests in the faculties, in the body's organs. Shazel ma'alev. This comes from the heart. The liba polig l'chol shayfim, because the heart, arteries of the heart, polig, separate in all directions. The heart basically is like the central circular circulation that goes to the entire l'chol shayfim in all directions. Like a central thing in all the networks.
Right, that's why there's a pulse all over him.
Right. The hachayis. So he says the hachayis mahameach. What's the meaning behind this? Because remember, we said the chayis beikar is in the mind. The central nervous system begins in the mind, not in the heart. So the chayis mahameach ba belev bedam shaboy, because the chayis from the meach travels to the heart in its blood. Va'lev shaleich adam im hachayis l'chol evarim shezeh hachayis pnimi. So the process works like this: the mind, the brain, the central nervous system sends a message to the heart to beat, and gives it that, and the nerves basically, and the heart beats, and the heart is the force that transmits blood, circulates blood. Shaleach adam, he says, it actually sends blood or transmits it. Imachayis, the blood which is filled with life. L'chol evarim shezeh hachayis pnimi. So basically, he's comparing the right nostril is the chayis itself, similar to that, and the sign of it is breath, just like the sign of the pulse is the heart, which is how it works. The same thing. Breath is also dotze v'shuv, exhaling and inhaling. So the same thing as the chayis and the nose. Let's talk the first level of chayis here. Is the neshima breath like the pulse is a dual process, like a pump, in and out. So the heart contracts, and I never saw the connection. I always knew that. You always talk about these two, but he actually is comparing the dual movement of the heart's expansion and contraction to the breath's contraction and expansion. But it doesn't work that way. Is it when your heart beats? Is it exactly?
No.
Is it coordinated with the breath?
Yes.
No, it's not.
When you breathe in, the heart rate increases.
Sure.
Fine, but it's not the same cycle.
No, but it's coordinated.
No. But for example, when you're running fast, your heart beats faster and your breath goes faster.
Yeah. But they're off.
The breath also is meant to so-called cools off the heat.
Yeah, it works together.
It cools
they work
off.
in tandem.
Brings oxygen to the blood.
Well,
And the heart beats what takes it around. It's got to work together.
no, it works together. But
Like for example, if you hold your
they're
breath,
not
it doesn't mean
synchronized.
your heart stops.
No.
God forbid.
But you don't get any oxygen.
I'm holding my breath right now.
Your heart rate will go
Can you
up.
technically hold your breath and your heart goes up?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Because it's starting to
Work
compensate.
harder.
Okay, but bottom line is, so I get, what was it? Forget about us, we're full of toxins. What about a newborn child? Will their breath and their heartbeat mamish be coordinated?
No.
Sure.
A
No, they
newborn
won't.
child?
Sure.
Coordinated?
Same as ours.
Now ours can be full of, we don't breathe fully.
One second. If you breathe, one second. This one for sure.
When you
One
breathe
second.
in, the heart rate
I just want this
increases
one.
a little bit.
If you breathe,
No, but I'm saying would the heartbeat go like thump, thump? Is that,
No.
the breath doesn't go, that's not.
No, it's not like that.
well, I just want to
It's
say.
not like that for
Hello.
us either.
No,
Okay.
there is one sentence.
Bump,
One
bump.
sentence. There is something. If you breathe properly, something called the variable heart rate becomes equal.
I'm sitting with three doctors here.
No, 1 second.
One layman and three
Hello,
doctors.
I'm telling you a fact now.
Are there any patients left in this one?
Not
Everybody's
anymore.
a doctor.
Finished.
We need
Well done.
Spirit on.
I'm saying variable heart rate. If somebody's very
Yeah, we could do a test right now. I know he's breathing.
his nostrils are definitely open.
But it's
That's an experiment. This is a presentation.
Right, should we put it online?
Why not? You talk about the
We could do a YouTube demonstration.
live.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
seriously. I want to say is that when you breathe properly, your variable heart rate. If you check, I have a thing in my house. You can check it. If you're nervous, your heart rate is not equal. In other words, the space between every beat is not the same amount of time.
Okay.
If you breathe properly, and you breathe your diaphragm breathing, the proper breathing, then the sine wave goes normal. Did you know it?
Okay.
That calms you
Makes
down.
sense.
I
That
hear
calms
you.
you down.
Makes sense.
Okay.
All right. Anyways, it's so interesting, but I have a meeting at 8:30, so
This is
Go to at 8 o'clock.
8:30 Manhattan.
We'll go. We'll finish. I don't think we'll finish the whole
You
chapter.
take this with me. I'll take it tomorrow.
I don't know if we'll finish the whole
So we do
chapter.
it tomorrow.
No, take it with you.
We'll talk. We could email each other.
I don't mind. No, mind. I have another one. I don't know.
Take it with you. I don't want to start stuffing it. Take it.
This is too bad. But anyway.
Not too bad. Let's
huh?
continue.
We'll-
Just make sure to breathe well and make sure you're hard.
The train, yeah.
So anyway, we'll give you. It's all online. You can check it out.